Since the war broke out in South Sudan in 2013, a lot of experiments or peace process have been brought in place. The first experiment collapsed with two armies going at each other. The peace process died. The second peace process came. We managed to go to get what we have got right now. There is a peace process, a semblance of peace holding. How long it will hold, we just don't know. But it's upon the people of South Sudan and the international community to help the people of Sudan to pump in resources needed to sustain the peace process, which is so fragile that it could actually break. And once it breaks, it makes matters worse for the region. South Sudan remains a sick child of Africa. A sick child in the sense that senseless killings have taken place. Over 380,000 people are not traceable. Accountability has been overshadowed by political machinations. How long can this take on? How long can this stay? How long can this happen? And how shall we control it? How do we bring it to a conclusion? A peaceful, stable South Sudan. My proposals range from funding the government to sustain the projects of peace process that we agreed, changing the peace model by bringing the UN special envoy in the region, fully equipped, logistically equipped, supplied, mandated to keep law and order and have sustained the peace process, the ceasefires that are there. If that can be done, South Sudan will be stable. If that stability does not come, then it is up to the world to decide another method beyond what they have done so far. And that method is accountability through the courts that will deter any further occurrences of a war. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, where I get to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and it is a pleasure to have you on board. We shall start our bulletin this afternoon from Nigeria, where Nigeria's presidential aspirant Adamu Garba wants the country's name to be changed to the Nigritian Federation, or simply Nigritia. He says the name change will be part of the reforms he will pursue if he wins elections. Nigerian presidential election will be held in February 2023. He cited other African countries like Ghana, Kenya, Benin and Togo that changed their colonially induced names on independence, arguing that identity is everything. Mr. Garba has also posted a video demonstrating the right way of pronouncing the proposed new name. And then we go to Rwanda, where Swedish authorities have extradited a Rwandan man to Kigali over genocide charges, which he is accused to have committed when he was a university student. The Rwandan prosecution said it received Jean-Paul Makoyinza on Wednesday and commended Sweden for its contribution to fight impunity. Mr. Makoyinza, 50, was arrested in Sweden in November 2020 on a Rwandan arrest warrant. He lost an appeal against his extradition last December. He has lived in Sweden for more than a decade. He is accused of crimes of genocide for his alleged role in searching and identifying Tutsis to be killed during the 1994 genocide when he was 22 years old. At a time, he was a student at the National University of Rwanda, located in his hometown Butare in South Rwanda. Mr. Makoyenzi has not commented about the charges he faces in Rwanda. And more than 10 million children are among those facing severe drought in the Horn of Africa. The United Nations Children's Body UNICEF estimates that this figure is 3 million higher than it was just 2 months ago. They say that unless more money comes in and rain falls, the region could face an avalanche of child deaths. UNICEF's Executive Director Catherine Russell told the BBC that the drought was the worst climate-induced emergency in 40 years. UNICEF requires about $250 million for humanitarian aid to Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Eritrea, and Djibouti. And a prominent Sudanese politician and former cabinet minister who was detained by the military following a last year's coup has been released on bail. Khalid Omer Yusuf had been part of a task force that seized property and fired bureaucrats linked to the former President Omar al-Bashir. 2 other members of the same task force are still being held. Sudan's military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has been reinstating Bashir's loyalists who had been sacked after the former president was overthrown in 2019. There has been frequent protests against the coup, which have been put down with force. More than 90 protesters so far have been killed. And Mali has accused the French army of spying after it used a drone to film footage which purported to show soldiers burying bodies near a military base that was recently returned by France. The military-dominated government in Mali said the images were false and intended to accuse the Malian military of killing civilians. France released the drone footage earlier this month, saying it showed Russian mercenaries working for the Malian government of burying bodies in the sand near this base at Gossi. France has denied that its soldiers were involved in the massacre at the site and says it is Russian-backed attempt to discredit its military. Thousands of French troops have been fighting Islamist militants in Mali for nearly a decade now, and France had decided to withdraw them from disagreements with the military rulers who seized the power in a coup last year. And a veteran Tunisian left-wing politician has launched a new alliance aimed at countering what he describes as President Kais Saied's recent power grab. Ahmed Najib Chebi said the new National Salvation Front, comprised of 5 opposition parties, aims to re-establish democracy in Tunisia. Last July, President Saied sacked the government and suspended parliament. He has since seized control of the judiciary and given himself the power to appoint the head of the Electoral Commission. Mr. Chebi has called for a salvation government to lead the country during a transition period before the new elections. And then we head over to Somalia, where the Speaker of Somalia's Senate has been re-elected, a key step for country to be able to hold presidential elections. Abdi Hashi Abdullahi was re-elected by the 54-seat upper house during a vote that took place in a highly secured compound in the capital, Mogadishu. His appointment means all that remains before presidential elections can take place is to vote for the Speaker of the 275-member lower house, the Chamber of Parliament, which wields more power and influence in Somalia. The country uses a complex indirect political system, and political parties do not contest elections, nor do one-person, one-vote elections take place. Instead, the lower house is chosen by delegates appointed by clan members and members of civil society who are selected by regional state officials. Senators represent Somalia's 5 regional states. The 2 houses vote for a president. The country has missed several deadlines to conclude elections, resulting in sanctions against members of parliament by the United States. And then we head over to South Africa, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has promised more help to rebuild communities devastated by the recent floods, but has warned of tougher measures to ensure relief funds are not lost to corruption. Some 435 people died and more than 50 are still missing, most in KwaZulu-Natal province. Cyril Ramaphosa said the flooding was evidence that climate change was the biggest threat to the future of humanity. He said many South Africans were worried that money for victims of the flooding will be lost to corruption, something he described as a great source of shame. Mr. Ramaphosa said real-time audits will be carried out to prevent funds from being stolen. And then the latest is that the World Health Organization's Director General announced the lowest global death toll since March in 2020. According to World Health Body, there were just over 15,000 deaths caused by COVID-19 reported last week. Speaking in Geneva, the Director General alerted for the consequences of the drop in testing, which could compromise efforts at following the evolution of the virus. According to a recent study published in medical journal The Lancet, the pandemic caused more than 18 million deaths, more than 3 times the official estimate. And then we head over to Burkina Faso, and community leaders and fighters from local armed groups have begun talks with an uncertain outcome in Burkina Faso, with the endorsement of the military junta that took power in the country, facing jihadist violence since 2015. In early April, the junta that overthrew elected President Roch Marc Christian Kabore on 24th January announced the creation of a local dialogue committees with Burkinabe groups with no links to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which has been destabilizing Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso through violence for several years. In Burkina Faso alone, jihadist violence has killed more than 2,000 people in the last 7 years and forced at least 1.8 million to flee their homes. When the jihadist attacks began, the enemy was essentially crossing borders north. Francois Frangrana, the commander of the Special Intervention Unit of the National Gendarmerie, which is spearheading the fight against jihadism in the country. And then we go back to Rwanda, and a Rwandan opposition lawmaker slammed the Rwandan-UK asylum seekers deal, arguing it could create budget difficulties and destabilize the society in the long run. Frank Habineza, a Rwandan opposition lawmaker, has criticized Britain's decision to send asylum seekers to his home country. He is one of the rare critical voices on the matter in the East African country. The president of the Democratic Green Party of Rwanda called the deal inhumane, questioning its illegality. And that is the end of the news this afternoon. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Enjoy the rest of your day, and bye-bye for now.
Viewers and the comrades, the people, the Pan-African people of Africa, and mainly the people of Kenya. Elections in Africa create difficulties. Everywhere in Africa, you find conflicts emanating from elections. Results declared, the loser does not come out to concede. Elections, if not well managed, can trigger the worst crisis for any nation in Africa. It is therefore very prudent for the people of Kenya not to buy populist ideas and forget the hinge point of electoral reforms, electoral injustices, electoral systems, mechanisms that can change Kenya and bring a credible results of an election where the losers and the winner will agree this was a fair contest. Given that circumstances, the circumstances that surround our badly managed elections, Kenya faces this challenge. A referenda of reducing MPs to 0 does not solve your problem, because that problem of Kenya is a structural challenge. It's a structural challenge in the sense that the structures themselves give access to more money stolen, to more money hidden,
to more money misappropriated by various institutions. Therefore, to have credible electoral reforms, credible electoral systems, credible electoral mechanisms will resolve 1/3 of the Kenya's problems, in that we shall have credible, proportionally elected people who represent all the views of the people of Kenya. That is my take. And that's the take of anybody who looks at the current situation, that any group that would come up and has not discussed the question of elections in Africa and in Kenya as a case study, and use it and look at how many dead bodies do we always collect when we mention the word elections. It is all over Africa. In Uganda, it is happening. In Zimbabwe, as we speak now, they are on the streets of Harare. It's because of elections. They want to come and overthrow and break down everything in Zimbabwe. It's elections. So elections in Africa create conflicts. But how can we stop violence before and after elections? Is through proportional representation of the model of South Africa, which has held elections, but there's peace on the streets of the cities. Thank you very much, viewers. Thank you very much, my people of Kenya. That's my message. I stand to be corrected, but I think it is only until you get a proportional representation system that will deliver every part of this country into your house of representation, into your elections, is when stability and tranquility will be permanent forever in this country. Thank you.